I work at this restaurant that rhymes with Joe's for about 2 years now. The pay is decent enough, but the hours are brutal. I typically get off around 1 a.m., tired from being on my feet all day, dealing with demanding customers, and smelling like fryer oil. All I want by the end of my shift is to get home, shower, and go to bed. Last night was rough. We had a large party come in right before closing, and they stayed for nearly 2 hours after we were supposed to lock up. By the time I finally clocked out, it was almost 2 a.m., and I was dead on my feet. The drive home is usually peaceful that late at night. The roads are empty, and it gives me time to decompress before I get home. But not last night. As I was approaching my apartment complex, a truck and a sedan that had been behind me suddenly sped up and cut me off. I didn't really react much beyond a slight eye roll. People drive like jerks sometimes, whatever. But then I noticed they were turning into my apartment complex too. My apartment complex is ridiculous. The designers must have been drunk when they planned it because it's like a labyrinth. There's only one entrance, and you have to wind through this confusing series of turns to get to the actual parking areas. Because of this design, I ended up stuck behind these two vehicles, crawling along at a snail's pace. The sedan, which was in front, pulled into a spot first. The truck continued forward, passing a perfectly good empty spot. I didn't think twice and pulled right into it. It was a clean park, not crooked, plenty of room on both sides, nothing unusual. That's when all hell broke loose. The truck started honking continuously. I could hear the driver screaming something through her window, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. I grabbed my bag and got out of my car, ready to head up to my apartment and finally get some sleep. The woman in the truck rolled down her window and started yelling at me. She told me that I move my car immediately, claiming that she was going to park in that spot. I was tired and in no mood for this nonsense. I simply told her there were plenty of other spots and apologized half-heartedly. When I started walking away, I noticed the guy from the sedan jogging over. Great! The man approached me and told me that I needed to move my car. He said the woman was his wife and that she had intended to park in that spot. I told him that I was really tired and pointed out that there were many other spots available just a little further in. I said I was going home now. He stepped closer to me, getting right in my face, and told me once more to move my car. I put my hand in my jacket pocket, gripping my keys. I warned him to back off or I would call the police. He said that if he had wanted to beat me up, he would have already done so. I took out my phone, but before I could do anything, the woman had already gotten out of her truck and was on her own phone. The woman said she was calling the police right then. She said that I had stolen her parking spot and was threatening her husband. I couldn't believe it. They were calling the police over a parking spot. At 2 a.m., I stood there as she reported her emergency to the dispatcher. While we waited for the police to arrive, I tried to calm things down. I apologized if I had taken a spot she wanted and said I hadn't realized she was planning to park there since she had driven past it. I pointed out again that there were plenty of spaces just a little further in. The woman dismissed my explanation, saying it wasn't about the parking spot. She said I had been aggressive toward her and made her feel uncomfortable. I reminded her that I had simply walked away from her and it was her husband who had threatened me. She justified her husband's behavior by saying that, of course, he had acted that way because she was a girl. She added that I had my hand in my pocket and was being rude, which had scared her. The mental gymnastics this woman was performing were Olympic level. She was twisting everything around to make herself the victim. About 15 minutes later, a police car pulled up. Two officers got out, looking annoyed to be called out for something so trivial. The couple immediately launched into their version of events, talking over each other about how I had stolen their parking spot and then threatened them. When it was my turn to speak, I explained what happened. I told the officers that I work late shifts and just wanted to park and go home, that I didn't know the woman intended to take that spot since she had driven past it, and that her husband had approached me in a threatening manner. The officers looked tired. One of them sighed deeply. The officer asked me if my car was legally parked, and I said yes. Then he asked if I was a resident there, which I also confirmed. The officer then turned to the couple and told them they needed to either find another parking spot or leave the premises. He told them that Stealing a parking spot wasn't a crime. The woman was indignant and asked about how I had supposedly threatened them. The officer replied that from what they could gather, no threats had been made. He said this was a civil matter at best and a waste of police resources. He asked them to move their vehicle and let everyone get on with their night. The husband started to argue, but the second officer cut him off. The second officer told the man that this wasn't up for debate. He told him to move his vehicle now, or they would issue a citation for obstruction. The couple finally gave up. As they walked back to their truck, the woman looked at me angrily. They drove off deeper into the complex, and I never saw where they finally parked. The officers nodded and left. I walked up to my apartment, now even more tired than before, but satisfied that their entitled behavior hadn't paid off. I'm just hoping I don't run into them around the complex again. Some people really will call the police over anything. Back home with my mom, we have 5 pets that I miss. But since I moved to another city for grad school and plan to travel once the pandemic ends, adopting wasn't an option for me right now. Still, my partner and I wanted some animal companionship, so we decided to become foster parents for a local organization that rescues cats. The arrangement worked. We'd only have 1 cat at a time, and our first foster was this gray female cat named Smoke. She was about a year old, playful and cuddly despite her rough past living on the streets and going through a pregnancy. After she recovered from her surgery, the organization and we started looking for her forever home. Gray cats are rare in our area, so on the first day of posting her adoption listing, we got interest. A couple reached out to me, and after chatting and answering their questions, they asked to meet Smoke. We set up a date, and when they came over, they fell in love with her. The woman told me they already had 4 cats and seemed to know about the challenges of introducing an adult cat to a multi-cat household. They seemed fine, so we approved the adoption. Smoke was scheduled to go to her new home on Monday, and everything looked good. They were keeping her in a separate room to help her adjust. Not even a full week passed before I got a message. She messaged me saying that Smoke was being aggressive with her other cats, which were all female, and that she was thinking about returning her. I wasn't surprised by the adjustment issues and tried to give some guidance. I told her that she had probably introduced them too quickly and suggested she separate them again and give it more time. I reminded her that adult cats often take weeks to adjust to new environments and other cats. She agreed to try my suggestions. She sent me videos of the cats eating together. Smoke seemed more relaxed, so I thought everything was back on track. A few days later, another message arrived. She told me that she and her husband had been fighting a lot because of Smoke. She said that Smoke kept trying to attack their other cats, and since her cats didn't fight back, they were getting hurt. She asked if she could return Smoke, pleading with me not to send the cat back to the streets. I was getting frustrated but tried to be understanding. I sent her a text explaining the situation. I told her that if she gave Smoke up, I didn't know if I could keep her at my place again. I pointed out that while she might not see it as abandonment, that's what she would be doing. I said that 2 weeks was barely enough time for a former stray to adjust, especially with other cats. I mentioned that Smoke was already doing fine with their dog, so she probably wasn't aggressive. I said that these things take time and patience. She was crying during our conversation but agreed to keep trying with Smoke. That weekend passed, and then on Monday, exactly 2 weeks after they had adopted her, I received a voice message with the same complaints. She sounded stressed out. I didn't try to convince her this time. I could see she couldn't handle the situation, so I just arranged to get Smoke back. I talked to my partner, and we agreed to let Smoke stay with us again. When the woman came to drop off Smoke, she was crying and saying she was sorry and couldn't handle it anymore. Though I was angry that she'd given up so quickly, I remained polite and took Smoke back along with the items she had bought for her, which she donated. Another week went by, and then I received texts from both her and her husband. They asked if they could have Smoke back, saying they missed her and wanted to give it another try, this time with a cat expert to guide them through the introductions. I was mad. I needed time to think, so I told them I'd give them an answer the next day. I talked with the organization, and they were shocked by the request. They agreed with my decision not to return smoke and suggested I be the one to tell this since I had been the main contact. I wrote a message explaining why I wouldn't be returning smoke to them. I said that, while I believed they had good intentions, they weren't prepared to handle the situation, and I didn't want to risk smoke going through this again only to be returned later. I said they might regret their decision, but it was something they would have to deal with. I also asked them not to contact me again because I was worried she might be persistent. What happened next was unbelievable. She lost it. She contacted the organization, and though they tried to explain that they weren't changing their minds, she wouldn't accept it. Then she sent me a text. She sent me an angry message saying I didn't give the cat a chance. She called me crazy and cold-hearted. She threatened to blast the organization across social media, which worried them since they're small and depend on their reputation. I thought her behavior would end there, but no. She took things to another level. She threatened to call the police and make a false report claiming that she had just left the cat with me temporarily because she was going on a trip and that I had stolen the cat from her. The audacity of this woman. I freaked out a bit because I had deleted our WhatsApp conversation and was trying to recover it. She even contacted her district attorney friend and told her the same false story. Her friend talked directly to the organization's attorney. I managed to find some screenshots where she clearly stated she was surrendering the cat to us. When presented with this evidence, the DA apologized and backed off. This all happened yesterday, and while I don't think she's going to try anything else, who knows with someone this unstable? Never delete your WhatsApp conversations because some people are just plain crazy when they don't get their way. I work as a truck driver for a moving company in the big city. The job pays well, and I get to see different places. The downside is parking in challenging spots since many customers live in crowded areas. A year ago, my team and I drove 150 kilometers to another city for a company moving job. When we arrived, we saw construction work next door to our destination. This made things difficult because the construction took up part of the sidewalk. Normally, there would be enough space for 2 trucks. Since the road only had 1 lane each way, I parked my truck partially on the sidewalk for safety. I didn't want to cause a traffic accident. I left enough room for pedestrians to pass without stepping onto the road. This parking is legal in my country during loading and unloading. We worked for about 30 minutes when he showed up, a middle-aged guy on a bicycle who looked ready to save the world from injustice. I'll call him EB. He stopped next to my truck and started taking pictures. I ignored it since this happens often. Then EB told me to move my truck. I said no, explaining I was working, and there was enough room for him to pass. He argued about what would happen if someone with children and a carriage needed to get by. Right then, a woman with a baby carriage walked by without problem, looking confused as we both looked at her. I smiled at the timing. I kept working during this talk. EB then said my parking was illegal. I told him it wasn't, and he could look up the law. He got louder, saying it was illegal and I needed to move the truck. My co-workers came out from inside with more items to load. One asked what was happening. I said just some jerk trying to make me move the truck, nothing unusual, and told them not to worry. My other co-worker asked EB if he had anything better to do than bother people who were working. EB said that he would call the police if we didn't move the truck. We smiled and went back to work, ignoring him. We knew he couldn't do anything, and we had a busy day with several stops. We already expected to work overtime without this problem. About 15 minutes passed while the guy made phone calls. I figured he was calling our company and the police while ranting about my parking. Then he repeated his threat about calling the police. I laughed and asked who he had just called. EB went quiet for a minute before continuing about my illegal parking. Then I saw a police car driving behind him. The officers looked at the situation, slowed down, smiled, and kept driving. It was midday now, and many other trucks in the area were partly on sidewalks, postal trucks, food delivery vehicles, and others. I told EB he could bother the other truck drivers too, since I wasn't the only one parked like this. I thanked him for the laughs. EB was angry at this point. My co-workers and I told him to leave unless he planned to pay us for the time we were wasting on him instead of working. He finally left, but that wasn't the end. EB posted about this on Facebook to his 100 friends, and my co-worker spotted it. He wrote that I was a jerk for parking there, and we were disrespectful, saying we just thanked him for the laughs. At first, I ignored it, but then I found out he also wrote about almost being fined for calling the emergency number. The operators warned him if he called again, he would get fined for misusing the emergency line. It was a long day, but we laughed about the situation. The construction workers nearby also asked what that was about. We told our boss, and he laughed at how ridiculous some people can be. We finished the job on schedule despite the distraction. Dealing with entitled people is part of the job, but this one gave us a story to tell. When tuition bills started piling up during college, I took a job at Buffalo Wild Wings on campus, or B-Dubs as everyone called it. They put me at the front as a hostess, so I dealt with customers and delivery drivers picking up orders. Working at a wing restaurant on a college campus during football season is chaos. Hundreds of hungry students and alumni pile in before and after games, plus constant delivery orders from people watching at home. As hostesses, we handled online orders. Delivery drivers would sign the receipt to confirm pickup, often writing notes like "please review" or "5 stars" next to their signatures. We could rate drivers through our system, but rarely had time during busy periods. We knew most regular drivers well. They understood that orders could take 15 to 30 minutes to be ready. Wings need 12 minutes to cook, plus time for saucing, packaging, and kitchen backups. But there was this one driver. We called him the Huffman behind his back because he huffed and puffed while waiting for orders. The first time I met him, he stormed in for an order placed 3 minutes earlier and acted shocked when told it wasn't ready. I told him the order had just come in and would take about 20 minutes since we were in a rush. He complained that he had other deliveries to make. I explained that wings take time to cook and offered him the option to wait or come back. He stood directly in front of the counter, sighing loudly every 30 seconds, checking his phone, and glaring at me like I controlled how fast raw chicken cooks. This happened almost daily. We'd tell him the wait time, he'd make a scene and hover around making everyone uncomfortable until his order was ready. I once reminded him that we don't control kitchen prep time. He said maybe someone should, that we were costing him money. Sometimes he'd be just snippy. Other times, during rushes, he'd make loud comments about our incompetence that customers could hear. The breaking point came during a hectic Saturday. We had a new girl working with us on only her second day. The Huffman came in for an order just placed, and she gave him the standard wait time. The new girl told him the order was placed 5 minutes ago and would take around 25 minutes since we were busy. The Huffman got angry, asking if she understood how delivery works and saying he didn't get paid to wait for us to figure out our jobs. His voice got louder until he was shouting. The poor girl turned away with tears in her eyes. I stepped in. I told him to calm down and reminded him we'd explained this process many times. I suggested he could unassign from the order if he didn't want to wait. He dismissed me and demanded we get the order ready. He stood there for the next 20 minutes until his order was ready. When it came up, he snatched the bag from my hands and stormed out, leaving his receipt with his usual PL's review on it. I comforted the new girl afterward. I was livid. We had no control over how fast wings cook. We were understaffed, overworked, and doing our best. That night, it slowed down around 10 p.m. While organizing receipts, I noticed the Huffman's signature and review request. That's when it hit me. He always asked for reviews, but we never gave him any. I searched his name from the receipt in our tablet. I could access every order he'd ever picked up from us and rate drivers after the fact, going back months. I went through each order. 1 star, 1 star, 1 star. For every order he'd picked up from our restaurant, I left at least 30 one-star reviews. Driver ratings are a big deal in delivery apps. Your rating is an average of all reviews, and if it drops too low, below 4.3 on most apps, you can get deactivated. A bunch of one-star reviews could damage someone's livelihood. Did I feel bad? For a second. Then I remembered him making our new girl cry and all the times he'd been rude, and I didn't feel bad anymore. A few days later, the Huffman came for another pickup. I expected the usual attitude, but something was different. He walked in calmly and spoke in a voice I barely recognized. He asked about an order for someone named Jessica. I said I'd check and told him it had just been placed, so it would take about 20 minutes. I waited for the explosion. Instead, he nodded. He said it was no problem and he'd wait out of our way. He thanked me for checking. He smiled and sat in our waiting area. No pacing, no sighing, no glaring. When his order came up, he approached calmly. I told him the order for Jessica was ready. He thanked me for my help that day. When he signed the receipt, he wrote 5 stars please with a big smiley face. As he left, I smiled to myself. Someone had checked their driver rating and didn't like what they saw. I don't know if he figured out it was me, but he learned that treating service workers poorly has effects. The next few weeks he was polite, patient, and pleasant every time. He chatted about weather, asked how our day was going, and thanked us for help. The change was so complete that co-workers asked if he was okay. Did I feel guilty about threatening his job? Maybe. But people need wake-up calls. If bad reviews turned him from Jekyll to Hyde, I did the delivery world a favor. Leaving reviews for drivers became my favorite part of the job.